नमस्कार दोस्तों, वेलकम टू चैनल टॉक्सिकोलॉजी ऑन बोर्ड. Today in this video we'll be discussing another important topic with respect to prospective, retrospective, case control studies as well as cross-sectional studies. So these are all types of epidemiological studies. So we'll directly dive into the question. This question is taken from ABT Recertification Question Paper 2000 Part C. Okay. So the question is, which of the following types of epidemiological studies would be most useful in pinpointing industrial plants or communities that have an elevated rate of a particular disease. So we need to identify out of this type of which study is more applicable with respect to industrial plants as well as communities. Okay. So first option is prospective study. Option B is retrospective study. Option C is case control study. Option D is cross-sectional study and none of the above. The right answer will be in the green text, that is cross-sectional studies. If you look into these cross-sectional studies, no, they are very useful in pinpointing industrial plants and communities that have an elevated rate of particular disease. So, from this question, we'll try to read each and every concept. What is prospective study? What is retrospective study? Case control study and cross-sectional studies. Okay. These study designs means epidemiological study designs are foundational observational methods. So as I told you, in previous videos also you might have seen this comes under this observational studies, either case control or retrospective, prospective cohort studies. So these are foundational observation methods used to investigate health outcomes, risk factors, and disease prevalence. Prevalence means at that particular point of time. Okay. Prospective studies track groups forward in time. That's why always prospective studies are towards the future. Exposure has happened. What is happening? You have to follow either in the form of questionnaire or in the form of a survey to find out what is happening to that exposed population over a period of time, like 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year. Okay, so groups forward in time. Retrospective studies analyzed past data. Exposure has happened, accident has happened. Now you are going to find out what is the specific reason for that particular cause. So retrospective studies analyze past data, okay, so that once we study such kind of information in future, if such a thing is happen, we will be understood about that particular situation to handle in future. Then next, case control studies, they will look backward from outcome to exposure, similar to that of retrospective studies. And cross-sectional studies take a snapshot in time. For example, here, like I am going to study in a certain population from year 2026, like Jan 2026 to December 2026. That is a particular fixed time will be there in the case of cross-sectional studies. Case control studies towards backwards and prospective studies towards future. Okay, this is the thing you have to keep it in mind. So we'll see each and every option. First, we'll understand what is prospective studies in detail. The definition is participants are enrolled before developing the disease, okay, or outcome and followed forward over a time, okay. Still now the disease has not happened to the selected population in which we are studying, okay. What is the main purpose of conducting such a prospective study? It is ideal for determining incidence rate. At what rate this particular incidence is happening, causes, what is the specific cause, what is the agent or chemical which is responsible, establishing a clear timeline, how much the time of exposure and outcome, that is clear timeline for exposure as well as outcome, how much that particular individual or group of population has been exposed. Okay, and what are the advantages of this prospective study is that it is a strong evidence for causality, but this method is expensive and time consuming because it has not yet happened. Still, in order to get information from that population, you need to pay certain amount of money to that particular patient population. So that's why it is expensive. So prospective studies are expensive when compared to retrospective studies. Okay, this will you will get in your option. So that you have to keep it in mind. Then next we have retrospective studies. Retrospective studies, investigators look backward at the historical records. Already such kind of similar incidents have happened. So now we have a option to go back in the history and to find about that particular incident. Investigators look backward at historical records to define exposed population and unexposed population, following them forward conceptually to see if they developed a disease after the exposure, if they developed the disease or not, that we can identify by using this retrospective study. Okay, main purpose of conducting this retrospective study is when looking for outcomes that have already happened, already that incident has happened, but want to analyze them like a cohort study, want to understand what was the exposure, how many people have got exposed, what is the population, specific population or gender, like that. What are the advantages or weakness of this particular strength and weakness of this retrospective study is they're faster and cheaper than prospective. As I told you, prospective studies are expensive but highly dependent on the quality of the existing records at the time of, uh, uh, for example, COVID cases only, which took place in 2019 or 2021. Certain cases might have clearly been reported at the time of incident. Certain piece of information has been, for example, you have written about the patient but you have not written about the age or particular location and how much time he got exposed. If such data gaps are there, then that becomes very difficult, and the person who is doing the risk assessment, he will be biased to that particular situation, so there is high chances of subject to bias. Okay, for that reason, that is the biggest weakness with respect to retrospective study, because historically some case record, some data has been recorded. If on the real time, if they miss certain information to note it down in that particular case reports, because we have no other option, we have to go back historically what is recorded, based on that only you have to do the risk assessment. So that is the biggest weakness. Okay, but advantage is it is inexpensive, less expensive when compared to prospective study. Coming to next, we'll see the third option was case control study. What is case control study? See, a retrospective study that starts with the outcome, okay? So it is similar to that like of a retrospective study only, okay? That is cases, and compares them to those without the outcomes. That is control, okay? There is exposed population, unexposed population. So you are going to compare with them, okay? Looking backward at past exposure. This is the case control study which is taking place in the backward direction, okay? Purpose of this conducting case control study is excellent for in the case of rare diseases. There are certain diseases which are very rare. uh, for example, COVID only, it has happened only in 2000, but there is no, and for example, MSRA incidents, some epidemiological incidents which takes place, which are very rare, or certain diseases are there which are only specific to certain genetically modified population will be there, recessive population, sensitive population. In that cases only, for such kind of diseases, rare diseases, case control study is very important, or outbreaks like epidemiological outbreaks to identify potential risk factors. What was the factors which were responsible for that particular disease? Okay, what are the strength and weakness of case control study is it is quick, cost effective, efficient for rare diseases, but prone to recall bias. Since already similar to that of retrospective cohort study, at the time, if certain information is missing in the records, then there is no way you can go back and correct that, because it has already been recorded. So that is the biggest disadvantage. There will be a recall bias. Okay. Next one is fourth option, that is cross-sectional study. Cross-sectional study observes a population at a single specific point in time, a snapshot. Here you can see, okay, as I told you, no, from Jan 2026 to December 2003, there is fixed interval is there. In the case of prospective study, it might go, for example, today I'm start collecting the data from 2020. I want to collect it till the patient dies, or like till 2036 or 46. So there is no end point. This is unidirectional. It is going in the future. Okay. So here, in the case of cross-sectional study, there is fixed time point will be there. Specific point in a time, that is called a snapshot, that you have to remember with respect to cross-sectional study. Main purpose of conducting cross-sectional study is used to assess prevalence. Prevalence means how much, and of a disease or a risk factor. Okay, and what are the strength and weakness of cross-sectional studies? It is fast, cheap, that is quick, cheap, good for generating hypothesis. So most of the PhD thesis, if you see, for example, use of mobile, that is cell phones, and its association with hearing loss or its association with cancer, like that, this type of things you can frame a hypothesis, so that will come under cross-sectional type of studies. Okay, good for generating hypothesis, but cannot determine causality or incidence. Is there really an association with the use of cell phones as well as causing cancer, or use of cell phones and causing hearing loss, that exact determining exact casualty and incidents, it becomes much more challenging, even though you can be able to frame the hypothesis for your research purposes like PhD or postdoc. Okay, now we'll see a comparison table between prospective, retrospective, case control, and cross sectional. Prospective, as I told you, know it is in the forward direction. Okay, start of incident investigation, and it goes till up to future. Okay, time frame is future. Main purpose is to identify incidents as well as casualty. Coming to retrospective, it is in backward, direction is towards backward, time frame it is in the past, and mainly we are finding for risk factors. Case control study, similar to that of retrospective study, it is also in the backward, time frame is in the past, and it is mainly useful for rare diseases or epidemiological incidents or outbreaks. And coming to cross-sectional study, it is in a fixed time point, that is in a snapshot. Time frame is, it is not future, it is not past, it is in the present. And main purpose is prevalence. Prevalence means how much. Okay. So now we'll see another question. This question is also taken from ABT recertification question paper 2000 part C. So here the question is which of the following parameters best reflects development of a disease and defined period of time? Since we are already discussing about past, present and future types of studies, that's why we'll discuss another question with respect to parameters and developmental of the disease as well as defined period of time. Option A is incidence rate. Option B is prevalence rate. Option C is mortality rate. Option D is age specific mortality rate. Option E is case fatality rate. The right answer will be in the green text, that is incidence rate. We need to identify which of the following parameters best reflect development of a disease in a defined period of time. Incidence rate, in it is already defined time will be there. Okay, so we will see what are the different formulas and definitions for each type of this particular option. So first we'll discuss in general. If you look into this key epidemiological measure, these are all for conducting an epidemiological studies, you need different endpoints to measure it. So we have these endpoints: incidence rate, prevalence rate, mortality rate. Okay. So these key epidemiological measures, they will define the disease frequency, how often the disease is happening, and death within the population in that mortality rate. Okay. Mortality in that particular population. So incidence will measure new cases. If there are any new outbreaks are there, that you can get it from incidence. Incidence rate will give that one. Coming to prevalence rate, measures total existing case, both past and present, that is burden. Okay, I will give you the formula also. Mortality rate measures death rates in total population. Case fatality rate measures severity, how severe that particular disease is there, risk of death among the those which are infected. Certain, in that particular population, certain people will be infected, but they might not end up with the disease. They might be still in morbid conditions. So in that case, case fatality rate will give you the risk of death among the people who got infected, while age specific mortality isolates death rates for a specific age groups like young population, infant population, or pediatric population, aged population, geriatric population. Like that, you can define that particular mortality based on age specific. Okay, so we'll see one step. Option A will see what is the definition and what is the formula to calculate it. So incidence rate is number of new cases of a disease that develop in a population at risk during a specific time period. In this time frame only you are going to measure. Okay, purpose of mainly this incidence rate is probability of developing a risk, how often that particular disease will happen. That risk you have to estimate. This particular incidence rate is important. The formula is number of new cases during specific time. For example, I want to measure last 5 years or last 10 years, like that. Okay, new cases during specific time, total by total person minus time at risk. At the time, what is at the time of risk, what is the time into 10 to the power of 9. See, you need not remember the formula. What is important is with respect to options you have to remember, because these were asked before and this is a part of ABT syllabus. Okay. Second option is prevalence rate. Prevalence rate is total number of individuals in a population who have a disease at a specific time or over a period of time. Okay, including both new cases as well as pre-existing cases. And majorly this is prevalence rate is used to measure the burden of disease in that particular population. The formula is total existing case. Historically old cases as well as new cases. That is new cases plus old cases by whatever the total population at risk. For example, we are taking only in India. So last 10 years, whatever the cases were there, and now what are the cases are there in the Indian population, like that. You have to remember the example like that. Next, we will see what is mortality rate. That is crude death rate. Here you are taking, let's see the definition, the frequency of death occurrence within a population during a specific period of time, like last 5 years or last 2 years or last 1 year or last decade, 10 years. This mortality rate will give indicates the risk of death from all causes within that entire population. For example, India, you assume, so total deaths in a population by total population into 10 to the power of n. Okay, and coming to age specific mortality. Mortality rate calculated for a specific age group, allowing comparison between population with different age structures. As I told you, infants, pediatrics, from younger population to geriatric or old age population, identifies mortality differences across different age demographics. So we have a formula for this also: death in a specific age group by total population in that age group. Okay, so like this you can understand all these types are they are like a measurement criteria in the case of epidemiological studies. And last one is case fatality rate, proportion of people diagnosed with a specific disease who die from the disease within a certain period. For example, in the 1 year or last 2 years or last 3 years, measure the severity of the virulence of a disease, particularly in the case of viral diseases or some, for example, MSRA is there, COVID disease is there. So, number of deaths from the specific disease, number of diagnosed cases of that particular disease. As I told you, whoever gets that contamination or the yeah, he who is diagnosed will not might not end up with a death mortality. He might be still be in a morbid condition or recovery stage. Okay, so key differences are that you have to remember with respect to incidence versus prevalence. Incidence is new cases, prevalence is total cases, old cases plus new cases, and mortality versus case fatality rate is mortality is death in the entire population, whereas your case fatality rate is whatever the affected population. You are already from the entire population, you are isolating the population which is affected with that particular disease. In that, you are seeing the case fatality rate. Okay, so why now the question is why we are discussing so much regarding epidemiological studies is that epidemiological studies are also important part in the case of ABT brochure. If you look into 2026 brochure, it is very clearly given under this particular point. Characterize toxicological effects in a field or clinical setting. Under this, we have endpoints obtained from standard controlled field, ecotoxicological studies, human clinical trials. In the clinical trials also, you will decide what type of clinical trial you are doing. Okay, there only you will decide case control, cross-sectional, blinded study, stagger study, like that, with human subjects and epidemiological studies. In that epidemiological studies only we are discussing cohort studies, case control studies, cross-sectional studies. I will request you to pause here and go through different types of analytical studies are there, different types of trials are there. See, non-randomized trials, randomized control trials, okay, uncontrolled trials. These are all part of clinical trials where you will learn about them in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and post marketing. All the 4 phases of clinical trials you will be studying about it. Okay. So thank you so much. For any questions, you can always write a mail to arya.priyanka@gmail.com. Be curious. All the best for your exam.